In this video, I'm going to talk to you guys about concealed carry and drastic changes and stuff like that, and catering your carry clothing to your environment. So let's talk about environment. So where I'm getting experience in this is having lived in Alaska for several years and started up this channel in Alaska. Now I'm in Arkansas. So it's a bit different, right? So the nighttime temperatures in the summer is like pretty much above what you would actually see during the day in the summer in Alaska. So it might be 80 degrees at night here, but 80 degrees is like ridiculously hot in Alaska. So sometimes it would reach the 90s here and there, but it's a very dry heat. It's a very different environment. Here it has humidity, like you're looking between 30 and 60% humidity for the most part, unless it had just rained. And you know, it's not like North Carolina where I spend a good amount of time, where the humidity is much hotter, or not. It makes lower temperatures feel hotter, but it's a lot worse as far as humidity is concerned. So you get very sensitive to heat and cold and stuff like that in North Carolina and areas like that, at least from what I remember. So based on the environment you're in, you're going to have to cater your loadout to that. And this kind of goes without saying, but you know, there's a few little details that I think people kind of forget. So let's go ahead and talk about clothing now. Now, when you're selecting clothing, my recommendation is to go with a clothing that at least closely resembles that of what is in your surroundings. And we're talking about the people in your surroundings. So the saying that you can't judge a book by its cover, that's not true, because the cover of a book is supposed to give an idea to what's inside it, right? So we're not talking about those leather-bound books that have nothing but the title on the spine. So we're talking about people, and we're talking about how we display a lot of things. We use iconography like this. I got it from a macadamia nut seller in Hawaii. So it shows, oh, he's been to Hawaii, he liked Hawaii, so he's wearing a shirt that he thinks is a little bit witty, right? That's iconography. So then you have other things as well. So haircuts, like here in Arkansas, there's not very much of a military presence, like active military. So a lot of times when I got a haircut, my standard haircut, I was confused as being a law enforcement officer, because they're the only ones that have that type of haircut around here. So you got to understand how you're going to present yourself. So also the type of clothing. Are you wearing OD green 511s in the desert, and you're wearing desert tan in a urban area, and you're going to stand out. So it's going to be unusual in those environments, right? So with that said, once you figure out like the type of clothing that would work for your area, maybe you can start getting into the weeds a little bit more. Now here, the sun's shining almost all the time, and that's risking sunburn, which is something I'm not a fan of. If I want to tan, I'll take off my shirt in my backyard and I'll tan. Or I'll do chores outside, or I'll do a workout outside to get my tan. But other than that, I don't want unnecessary sun exposure causing sunburns, which leads to, you know, discomfort out of your carry system and leading into days afterwards. So I actually like long sleeves, and so with having long sleeves, I have to get a little bit picky about fabric. Even if I'm wearing short sleeves, I have to be picky about fabric, because I'm trying to get a garment that is going to vent well, breathe well, but also is going to protect me from the sun a good amount and be able to conceal a firearm very well when I'm doing everyday activities. And think about it, we're not just standing here static. You notice how a lot of people, when they're showing how appendix carry is like covering everything up, they're just standing static. They're not bending over, there's no breeze against them, there's nothing really. So for me, that has never worked, because I'm sorry, but I don't have a big beer belly that kind of, you know, covers that up. And if you're slim and fit, and then you have a bulge out here, it's going to look a little bit odd. It's not a round bulge, it's an unnatural one, and I see that all the time. I can tell when someone's carrying in their appendix, because they have this big area here that is, you know, not broken up very well, and it sticks out like a sore thumb, at least for my eyes. But I check waistbands regularly. So when we get down to the clothing, like long sleeves, look at a sample here. This is something that can be found from Old Navy. It is a long sleeve, very light shirt, but also it has a stretch to it. So it stretches a good amount, and it also has this little feature right here, where it kind of has a V right here, where I typically carry at the 3 o'clock. So this V actually helps me get access to the firearm a bit better, and it also prevents this from getting pinched up against the other side of my body, because if you've ever worked and tried to do concealment drills, doing different positions, you can snag your clothing pretty well. So that's why I always recommend a stretch fabric if you're going to be carrying in an area that is kind of like this, like hot, or even, you know, mildly warm, I guess you could say. Number one, these types of fabrics tend to breathe a little bit better, but also it gives you better range of motion. You're not going to tear something by going for it. It doesn't seem to risk snagging as easily as something that doesn't have any flex to it. Now, you're not always going to be in an area that you'll have access to that, but I got this at Old Navy, and it was not really all that expensive. But, you know, some people, it might be considered expensive. So during these times, things are a little bit more expensive than they used to be, right? So anyways, now let's talk about color and, you know, general iconography. Now, a pretty popular thing, like across all the boards, but it's, you know, leaked into the shooting market is, you know, flannel. So depending on the type of flannel you get, that can be a good way to blend into your environment, kind of the gray man idea there. But, you know, color can actually be very significant when it comes to being able to hide, you know, that minor printing, that little edge on the back plate of your pistol, or the little edge of the grip. Even if you have a tiny pistol, those little things can print, depending on the color that you use. If you're going to be using like a gray, I like to use this kind of broken gray. This is a polo shirt that is set for the wash, but you can see that this gray is not really consistent. It has a little bit of mixed colors in there. It's not like, you know, red and you know, orange or anything, but it's just a darker gray mixed in with the certain gray, and because of the weave, it has a little bit of a stretch to it. But that's what I'm talking about, where you're selecting your colors to kind of, you know, pronounce wrinkles in a darker color. So when it wrinkles, it gives a little darker colors. It just looks like a wrinkle, and that's really the point. When you're carrying, you want to make sure that those little exposures, those tiny little printings, you know, from your firearm, is being, you know, disguised, if you will. So you need to have something that displays a good optical illusion, right? So iconography, depending on where you're at, it probably wouldn't be a good idea to wear this, even though it's a joke and it's from, you know, a macadamia nut farm in Hawaii. It could be displayed, it could give a very bad impression to people if you have to use your firearm in defense. It might be you trying to display something like, it's probably not a good idea to wear a shirt that shows a bunch of firearms and says diversity training or whatever. Last thing you want is for a prosecutor to be like, gun nut, just being trigger happy. Doubt it was self-defense. Depending on your area, that might be what you face. So, anyways, that's a consideration a lot of people need to have. Now, when we're in environments like this where we're kind of having to be picky and choosy on the type of clothing we're wearing, we also are going to have to take a better look at our gear. So it's not like Alaska where everybody's wearing cargo pants. This is an area where it's a lot of jeans, you know, khakis, you know, there's some formal wear and stuff like that, but you got shorts that might have cargo pockets in them and stuff, but for the most part, I'm not going to do shorts because, again, sunburns and stuff like that, it's really not as comfortable as a lot of people would like to think. So I have to pick my pants pretty selectively. Now, when 511 came out with these jeans, loved them. They have the extra pockets here, good for concealing a spare mag, good for concealing a tourniquet on the other side, and there's ways to conceal stuff. Like right now, I'm actually wearing Helicon Tex covert pants, and they have pockets all around the waistline that help conceal things, but it breathes really well, and it has a good mechanical stretch all the way around, and it is a bit water resistant, so it's pretty nice. And it's just an example of how you can cater your gear, your clothing to your environment and not lose too much efficiency. Now, speaking of efficiency, let's go ahead and talk about the last subject, which is practice. So I see a lot of people that'll practice, static. They'll do their appendix draw, they'll lean back so they can get the hold of the gun or whatever, and then they have to lean back to put it back in. Now, I don't know how people are trying to justify doing only static draws, because this world is constantly moving and mobility is key. So if you're not practicing hunching over and drawing at the same time, you're not going to see certain flaws. Like with appendix carry, when I had tried it, when you bend over, you are blocking yourself a good amount. And some people talk about how, well, it had retention value. Well, if you're concealing your firearm, where is the concern for retention unless you're sitting there plucking and you're like, yeah, I got a firearm and I'm pre-staging there. That might be a concern, especially if you're showing it as you're drawing. So you're not able to blade off, you're not able to kind of conceal it or anything like that. So you need to practice in a manner that is a little bit more realistic. Maybe crouch, dealing with somebody, because typically you're going to put your weight forward and then you're going to have to draw at pretty close range. If you're not really practicing on the move, if you're not practicing in these different positions, I would just say you're wrong. You need to practice in all different types of positions. You need to practice moving in all sorts of directions. And you need to be a little more realistic with your practice. And this is typically where I would find the weaknesses, even in, good cover garments that actually have a mechanical stretch to them. There might be weaknesses where I might want to take it into a tailor to get it altered or something of that nature. Don't find out if your clothing works or not, when an incident occurs. Make sure that it works in training. Bleed in training, succeed in life, or in real life, if you will. But anyways, I'm not going to beat that dead horse too much, but I hope you guys get the idea of what I'm trying to say here. But going from one area to another, or just being in an extreme environment, there are considerations that need to be taken. It's not as lax as it is in Alaska, where everybody's wearing 5-len type stuff and everybody's wearing cargo pants and everybody looks the same and there's a good military presence. So it's really not like that here in the lower 48. You will stand out a lot more if you're trying to be a rep for 511 or one of these tactical companies. But anyways, I appreciate you guys watching. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and you guys have a good one.